I'm sorry, I ran back for my bagel.
All right, well, thank you all for joining this morning. And if it's okay with everyone, I'll just facilitate this call and we can dive right in. Maybe we start with a quick round of introductions. And Michaela, if you wouldn't mind starting us off and sort of explain a little bit about your role and recent experience.
Yeah, my name is Michaela, and I was nominated and selected as the primary negotiator for independent students on the current negotiated rulemaking. And I'm really terrible at introductions. I'm a third-year law student, single parent, currently living in LA, but I was born and raised in Oregon. I've served on various student governments, and then also recently was the student parent advisor for the Ascend program at the Aspen Institute.
And this might be a dumb question, but it wasn't really clear to me the distinction between independent and dependent student for this case. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, so independent students are folks who don't have to claim, I mean, like the very basic version, right? Are folks that don't have to claim their parents' income as they're applying for like FAFSA and various student loan things. So a dependent student, again, has to claim their parents' income on that FAFSA, and thus generally sometimes can receive less, of course, unless they're like, that's not always the case. For me, I became an independent student before the normal age of 26 because I had a child. When you have a child, you qualify to be able to apply as an independent student, if that helps.
And Anne, would you mind going next since you served a similar role in the past?
Sure. I'm Ann Bowers, Annie B, and I was one of the first 15 student debt strikers. I was a student of Corinthian colleges, and I fought with the debt collective against the fraud in student education and for free higher education since 2015. And I served on the MedReg committee representing student borrowers in 2016. And I still try to help where I can.
Great. And this is a small enough group. Maybe we can just like open up the floor for like quick introductions and then just dive right in. I think the focus here is less on experiences with the school and more the experiences with the borrower defense process and the Department of Education.
So should I just start, or are we okay? So I'm Teresa Sweet, for the people that came in late. I'm the named plaintiff in Sweet v. DeVos, now Cardona. You know, I never would have considered myself an activist before, even though I'm usually kind of a loud mouth person when I see things that I think are wrong. But it's been a few years now where I've been trying to speak out every single opportunity I get to talk about my experience with borrower's defense, because really, I go back to when the judge in the case said that the whole situation has become disturbingly Kafka-esque. You know, we are in this horrible catch-22 where we've been fighting for justice, waiting for justice, thinking that we had justice, having it ripped away from us. And it's just been going on for years and years and years. And as has been said before, you know, not only is our due process probably being violated here, but, you know, it's ruining people's lives. The amount of debt that a lot of these students have goes well into the six figures. And it's basically at this point, it's inescapable because we still haven't gotten to a point where our applications have been approved. So that kind of tells you where I'm at, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about, you know, what the experience has been like.
Hi, everybody. I am Ashley Pizzuti, and Teresa and I actually both attended the same for-profit school. we know each other because after dealing with my husband and I getting close to $500,000 in debt shortly after leaving our school, which is just unfathomable. We were throwing, our loan payments were $2,600 a month, and we just couldn't even keep up. The school, hold on, my cat's meowing. Sorry about that. We all have animals that are needy today. We just couldn't keep up. And then the new rules came out and our school shut down, and we started to, we started a Facebook group just to kind of commiserate, why is our school being sold? Why is it being shut down? Who else is in this mess with us? We all just needed, support, because here we are almost a decade out and drowning in debt. And I feel that, my husband and I were fine. We were able to pay our bills. We were barely, but we weren't going hungry. And then we started collecting stories and data on some of the other borrowers because we needed a place to put all of our stories together. And finding out that some of our friends were homeless, some of our friends, parents who borrowed for their children, foreclosed on their houses. They, don't have any retirement, yet they're in their 70s, health scares. And this debt is just never ending. It just grows and grows and grows. And for us, a lot of our loans are private. So even for borrower defense, this is our first line of attack, and we're still fighting it. Without having borrower defense, we can't go after the private lenders and say, look, these are unfair. These are predatory, because according to them, we all signed up for this lifelong debt at 18 and 19 years old, with most of us having zero financial education or parents who went to college. So, my part in this and how I got involved was, just starting to collect data. And I knew the importance of collecting all these stories from my alumni and their stories, and trying to just give ourselves a voice and other for-profit schools a voice in this. And I'm sorry for the beeping in the background. We have a building being built about 15 feet from my apartment window since March 17th of 2020. So
Thank you so much for sharing. None of that came through for me, any of this background noise. You're totally
okay, good.
Hey, Ashley, can you share the number of students that you have hard data on, the number plus the amount of debt? What's that up to now?
So we have just only recently, we spent most of 2018 collecting data, and it was just, we used a Google form, and that just kind of got a little messy after we got over about 500 people. So we spent 2020 rebuilding the form. So we've only recently started collecting data again, but we have just under 500 people that have filled out our data form, and we're over $70 million in debt collectively. So that's 70 million held by less than 500 people.
in that data, or in any of your experience, I hope you don't mind if I just ask questions. Dixie and I actually created a list of questions of like specific points, especially that we were like, we don't have answers, right? Was anybody ever notified, one, that their application was like actually received or considered complete prior to any outcome?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, once you applied, they would send you a response email with an application number in it. Although when Ashley and I applied, it was so long ago that they didn't even have a formal application. There was just a list of questions that somebody in our organizing group had found, and they were said, answer these questions and send them what proof you have. And that's how the bulk of people from our school applied. People that are applying now, from what I understand, they're just getting what look a lot like form letters that say, your application is denied, and because it's been more than 3 years, you are not eligible for reconsideration, and nobody knows why. So that's just something that we're starting to collect now so we can show it to the attorneys.
I just want to touch on that too. So when back in 2000, early 2016, I think is when I applied, or maybe it was late 2015. We literally found a PDF buried deep on the Department of Education's website that we had to hunt for. We had to physically fill that out. It, you know, once you submitted it, you were supposed to email it with all of your supporting documents. Sometimes it wouldn't go through, so you had to keep trying. You would send it, and then you would wait a week, and then you would call the Department of Education and find out if they received it. It took me almost 4.5 months before they had me on file. And this goes with same with my husband, because we were doing them together. I finally emailed them again with all the supporting documents, and then I sent a certified letter or certified packet, which was then received. And then almost a month later, they finally had me on record with a case number. And that was a lot. That for a big chunk of us, that was the initial experience in applying for borrower defense.
Hi, my name is Pam Hunt, and I'm a debt collective member. And like Ann, I was part of the first group of Corinthian students, not the 15, but I was part of Corinthian 100. And we personally took our DTR applications to the Department of Education in DC, and we handed it to the then Secretary of Education at that time, Mr. Duncan. And so I never had to redo an application. Ours were completed, and you know, they accepted them. They had them on file. They just sat on them, and that was in 2015. And they sat on them forever. I mean, I would get notices saying that they've received it and they are, you know, going over it, processing it, and they'll let you know. I mean, I've never had to go back and refill it out, or something was missing, or was told that it was incomplete. And that was like in February of 2015. And you know, I mean, I did finally get relief, not until this time last year. However, yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, as a member, just like Ashley was saying, it's really bad what's going on, because like I said, this has been going on since 2015, and here we are getting ready to get into 2022. And just the whole process of the DTR is just ridiculous, because, you know, our biggest fight back then was, I mean, if you've proven, first of all, you've proven that Corinthian was a scam college, that they were doing, you know, criminal activities with the, you know, falsifying applications for private loans, accepting money from the Department of Education on behalf of students, and not doing what they said they were going to do, and all of that good stuff. Well, the Department of Education, it's been established that Corinthian was a scam school. Once they did that, and they can prove all the people who attended that school, because they're giving money to Corinthian on behalf of those students. Like, my check was going to Corinthian on behalf of me, so they know I attended. Our biggest thing is just do a blanket forgiveness. Like, why does everybody have to do these? You know, everybody has to have a different criteria, or all these nuances. Oh, this for you, that for you. What year you went, what program you were in, what does it matter? They're still engaging in criminal activity. It doesn't matter what year, what program, what this,
Right.
what that. We all should be given, blanket forgiveness. And because we're not, people have been suffering for all of these years. I did it in 2015. I got some relief last year. However, in the meantime, while I was going through this, I was renting a house, and the owner walked away from it. From the time he walked away from it, I tried to buy it from the bank. I had been living there already for 10 years. I tried to buy it from the bank, but I was not eligible because my debt to income ratio was too high. I had like $250,000 in student loans. So I could never get it. So eventually me and my 6 kids, one of whom is special needs, was evicted. We ended up living in a hotel for about 4 months. Then, we found someplace else to live. And I started trying to apply to buy a home through Habitat for Humanity and all of these different programs. Habitat for Humanity sent me a letter stating, I'm sorry. I mean, everything else I qualified, the number of people that were going to live there, my income, everything else qualified. But when they submitted my application, I was denied because my debt to income ratio was too high. So the Department of Education doesn't realize that, we may be numbers on a paper to them, but these are real people who are suffering real consequences because of these illegitimate student loans. And it just shouldn't be like that. And I've been through 2 administrations being a debt striker when I finally got relief this time last year. But like, how much longer are we going to have to do this? It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to tell you too that my son and I, when I started school, experienced hostless and staying in hotels, and I know that that's so hard. And you shouldn't have to experience that.
Exactly.
And if
I want to also like kind of go back to that. So when you submitted the claim, they never said that you needed anything else, but they never said, okay, it's complete and you're just waiting on a decision.
no,
They just like left you in limbo, like not
Mhm.
knowing whether they might actually pop up one day randomly and be like, just kidding, we need something. Like,
in my experience, no. If you could always call the borrower's defense hotline once they had that up and running, but you would get various answers toggling between your application is being processed and I don't have any information for you. And
Pamela, was that for you too?
That one,
That was pretty much it. I mean, because we went there and submitted them in a box and put it on the table. And from that time forward, that group of applications, to my knowledge, no one ever had to go back and add anything and whatever. And then when we would, because there were a couple times that I've emailed and called and gotten an email saying that, they had my application and that it was just being processed. That's it. That's the only thing that I've ever gotten, and that was always the answer. And then one day out of the blue, I just received a letter stating that my application was reviewed and that I was going to be getting debt relief for attending Corinthian College. I mean, there was no prelude or letting me know. It just boom, one day I got the letter. I got in touch with Thomas and the debt collective and showed it to him. And, and that's pretty much, from my understanding, how it happened to a lot of the people that were there that day that did get relief. It just boom, out of nowhere, people saying, hey, I got relief. There was, no prelude before that. I don't know, they just need to change the system. It sucks.
I never received any notice at all. Nothing. I just checked my student aid account and it was gone one day.
Wow.
Yeah, I never received any kind of notification.
that's stunning.
Yes.
So Michaela,
paperwork.
there have been these different iterations of the system, right? So for the very first year or so, all of the borrower defense claims came through the debt collective and were directly submitted to the Department of Education. And we know that they just simply failed to process some of those. And we had to resubmit and resubmit and resubmit. And in the early part of that process, I think there are a large number of people who tried to submit borrower defense claims and did everything that they were supposed to do. And the Department of Education has simply lost the paperwork. But most recently, like if you submitted a borrower defense application last month, I think you do get a notification saying an email notification it was received in most cases, but not in all cases, because the form is broken and there are glitches in the system. So some people still can't actually apply because, you know, this is especially for people who attended the Art Institute of Phoenix campus. The borrower defense form on the website cannot comprehend that anyone attended that campus. It's just miscoded in the system. But we can send you examples of what borrowers receive. And it is very, very confusing, both the notification when you submit, and then also the notification when people get denied or partial discharges or approved. It is very long, lots of text, and very, very confusing. And this is especially confusing for people who have older FFEL loans, because there are additional steps that you need to take once you get approved. And this was something that happened to Pam. Pam had FFEL loans, and it took like, I forget the exact amount, but it was many months between when you got that approval letter and when we actually got the discharge, because we had to go through that additional step and there weren't clear instructions. And then the last thing I would say is that when a borrower sits down and looks at the form, it's very misleading. They get the impression that they have to become Sherlock Holmes and build a case, when the truth is the Department of Education already knows all of the evidence. And in some cases, like ITT Tech, I'm going to post the link in the chat here. And just look at the documentation that we have, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of evidence. But the impression that the borrower has is they need to recreate a custom, you know, like make a case to a judge almost. And I've spoken to lawyers who are basically like, clients are hiring them to file a borrower defense on their behalf because it feels like you have to make a case. And in practice, the only thing that's actually relevant on the form is which school did you attend, what program of study, and what years were you there. That's really the only thing the Department of Education is actually reviewing. And the Department of Education already has that information. So there are over 700,000 ITT Tech students who should be getting cancellation under borrower defense. So far, only 18,000 have. And the vast majority of those 70,000 haven't even filed a borrower defense, and they shouldn't be made to. The Department of Education has all of the information they already need. And if we change the regulations through NEGREG, should be able to issue a group-wide discharge so that they discharge everyone's debt at once without making people jump through all these hoops.
Yeah, and if I could just to sort of give you an example, when Thomas is saying, you know, Department of Education already has all the information about these schools. If you were to just do a simple Google of the parent company that owned the school Ashley and I went to, they have been sued by 48 state attorneys general for their business practices. They have faced multiple lawsuits across the country from students and former students for their business practices. I mean, you know, none of this happened in a vacuum. Like, the Department of Education has so much information on these schools that there is no reason that anyone should still be waiting for approval. And I have heard it said in the past that there's probably, well, it was said by Betsy DeVos, to be frank, that basically there's students who are just standing there with their hands out for free money, and that there's all these bogus applications in the system. And it is just simply not true. I mean, fraud is fraud is fraud. It doesn't matter if it happened to you in education or by a bank or anything else. DOE has all the information. We should not have been waiting 5 years for this to be solved.
Here's something funny. That when I was at NEGREG, They referred to students as conniving when I was at the table. Oh, I got so angry. I said, you think we signed up for school because we wanted money? I mean, that's not an option. You don't get paid to go, you know, they're not paying you. I
Yeah.
was so angry. That's how they think of us. And it's just totally wrong. They're just wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it's disturbing to me that the rules that were changed during the prior administration specifically undermine the entire program. So Michaela, I'm not sure if you've heard this or not, but under the Obama administration, the approval rate for borrower's defense to repayment was 94% of people who applied got approved. Under DeVos, after she finally put out the regulations that they came up with, the denial rate became 94%.
She was
So
on a mission.
When you say that approval rate, do you mean of the people that they did approve or of all the claims that were there?
Of
Because I
all
feel
of
like that, like, I feel
Of
like
all-
if they had a 94 of the claims, then we wouldn't have had such a backlog still, right?
well, that just tells you the scope of the problem. So yes, it was a 94% approval rate of people who applied were getting their loans discharged. So
They actually, during NEGREG, they made all these promises. Okay, they were going to make all these things right. They did not keep their word on all these promises and changes that were supposed to take place. They didn't do it. When Betsy DeVos was in control, things kind of just got tossed out the window.
So are they holding on to numbers about like how many were being processed during those times?
well, so basically processing the applications just came to a screeching halt during the Trump administration. You know, as I said, Betsy DeVos has publicly basically said that all borrowers defense applicants are just standing here for waiting for our free money. They ground to a halt. I mean, there's things that I can't say because of my lawsuit, but if you look up any of the opinions or any of the things that the judge in the case has said in his public statements, you know, he actually brings up the fact that, you know, the DeVos, and they tried to make it sound like it was just this Herculean task because there's hundreds of thousands of applicants. Yet, as soon as we think we have an agreement, the Department of Education starts issuing tens of thousands of denials all at once. So it doesn't really hold water that they were saying, oh, it's going to take so much work. That's why it's taking so long. It was all, well, baloney, if I'm polite.
Yeah, those denials were just rubber stamped anyways. A lot of them had the wrong names on them or the wrong schools. I mean, I don't know where my application folder went. Oh yeah. This. Oh, I got the weird background, if you can see it. How thick this is.
It's a book. That's her application.
This is my application, and I was denied for lack of evidence. So, if that gives you kind of an idea.
That's your application for the DTR,
For
borrower
yeah.
defense?
Yep.
Wow.
We weren't safe because we knew what was going to happen when DeVos became the Secretary of Education.
Yeah, all of that's my data that I've collected. I've talked to numerous administration from my school who wrote me letters basically saying, you know, oh yeah, we know that your program was run in non-compliance. We were asked to lie about it to the accreditation. All of that is in that file.
Wow.
And so I,
Still got
for
denied.
my borrower defense, I every couple of months would call them and be like, hey, what's going on? Are you gonna, you know, I'm a very persistent person. So, you know, I would just make it every few months, I would give them a call. What's going on with this? I'd, you know, can I get my case number? Expect an email. I'm updating my file. And I would just keep sending them stuff. And then I would call back and say, did you receive this email? I sent you this PDF. So that's, you know, I kept a copy of everything that I have sent them. And that's basically what's in that binder.
Unbelievable. That's crazy.
On one of the things that we're considering right now is, you know, the automatic discharges. And one of the things that they currently have in place, apparently before it was if you re-enrolled within 3 years, then it couldn't be automatic discharge. And now they're trying to roll that back to 1 year. And I still am really struggling to understand how this could possibly help students or incentivize them going back to school. But right now they're saying that folks who have, you know, gone through these, if they re-enroll, they want to encourage them to continue their education by not giving them automatic discharge. And like, first off, I just want to be very clear, I'm really struggling with this logic. And so my question to you all is, did you all re-enroll within that period? And if it were the case that you could get automatic discharge after 1 year, if you do not re-enroll, would you have re-enrolled?
Are you saying re-enroll in school or re-enroll?
Yes. In any college, anywhere, public, private, anything, like, did you go back to school? And would you have, if that were?
So if I could speak to that really quickly, and many other people have told me the same thing. I personally, when I was, a while after I graduated, I was struggling because, you know, my student loan payments were about to be $3,000, $4,000 a month. I was told by the lender, the only way that you can avoid making these payments is if you're in school part-time. A lot of people know that. It was our only option. It was our only defense, because at that point, borrower's defense was not being discussed publicly. People did not know about it. So I have a strong feeling that that's part of the reason that they're trying to push that regulation. But at the same time, it still goes back to fraud is fraud is fraud. If they're saying that you somehow became less defrauded because you decide to push through and try to get an education, that doesn't make any sense. Like and it's completely unfair.
Well, a lot of people, I didn't go back to school, and I became a debt striker. So regardless to what was owed or whatever, I just was convicted that I'm not paying it. So that's how I became a debt collective, debt striker. But I couldn't go, after the years went on, as this was dragging on, the thought about going to school and changing courses, seeing that, you know, my master's degree was useless because it came from Everest, the thought popped in my head to go to school. But for myself and a lot of people, what has happened is that because so much money was spent at this scam school, and you know, you didn't get the quality education and our degrees are useless, a lot of our aggregate total was used up. So there is no more money to go back to school, like zero.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I know a
Like,
lot
they
of
don't start your
stories.
Pell over
No,
or
Huh?
anything?
no.
They don't
No,
give
you
you,
can't, because you can't
I
use
didn't even
Pell.
think of that.
Or
Yeah,
GI Bill.
see, yeah, a lot of the and this happened to a lot of the veterans, a lot of the veterans that went to these for-profit schools and were scammed. Like, they can't go back to, you know, they use their GI Bill money and it's all gone. So it's just, everything is a mess. So I can never go back to school anywhere unless I pay out of pocket, and who has that kind of money? So I have a bachelor's at a different college, but I have a master's that is totally useless. And even when I was trying to you know, get employment in different sectors for my master's degree, which is in criminal justice, as soon as they saw where that degree was from, that whole thing was a no-go. So me personally, I could never go back to school because there's no more money in the till, so to speak.
Just to touch on that, I know we're not here to talk about for-profit schools, but it was the MO of for-profit schools to get you to max out your federal aggregate maximum for student loans on a bachelor's or associate's degree. So it was intentional. You know, they made
Yeah.
it so that you would never be able to borrow again, because they sucked
Yeah.
up every single penny they could in federal student loans.
And they
So
wanted
I-
to sell their own private loans as well.
Mhm.
So I have a fun story to go along with that and seeing how that rule would apply. So when I applied to my school, I had already gone to a community college and had completed, so I had an associate's degree. The month of graduation from my school, which I did, I completed the program. I was all set to go. They allowed a lot of my community college classes to transfer in. So my last class, I did an internship. So I wasn't on campus. I had already walked in graduation, got all the graduation photos, basically told like, good job for completing the school. All my teachers had signed off, everything. I was finishing my internship on the other side of the country. I called because you needed to have an exit interview type thing. What are my next steps? When are my loans due? They didn't give me any of that information. So I called to find out as my internship was wrapping up. And I was told, oh, well, we changed our course catalog. So those associate classes no longer transferred in. So you're actually 3 classes short from getting your diploma. We're going to need you to come back in and re-enroll at our current rate for 2 more semesters so you can finish those classes. So
Wow.
I'd already moved across the country at this point, basically loading every item I owned into my car, had no money, and they're asking me to drive now back across the country. I had no housing again because I'd given it up to move across the country to start my new life as a graduate. And so I enrolled in a community college out here to try to finish those classes. So in that case, and I didn't have one because they didn't offer the class. So I'm still 1 class shy of I never received a diploma from my school. But because I re-enrolled in those community classes and paid for them out of pocket, then I would be ineligible to get borrow defense. Another thing is we were accredited by ACICS.
Oh yeah, they were.
I have tried to apply to go back to school several times. Absolutely none of the classes that I took hold any weight. I would literally have to start my bachelor's over again from the start. And because it's been so long with my associates, that was 20 years ago. None of those classes would even apply. I would literally have to start completely from square one with no available federal aid.
See, and these are the things that the Department of Education, these are the stories that they need to hear. I mean, I don't know what good it would do because I don't know, but these are the stories that they're not hearing. They're just looking at numbers and papers. There's real humans behind those numbers, and their lives are being so negatively impacted by the crazy decisions that they're making that they just, I don't know. I'm at a loss. That's terrible.
Yeah,
That is
to be
terrible.
honest, like I'm shocked that they would try to pass a rule like that. That is extremely disturbing to me.
So
I-
The
there's,
way I see it, fraud is fraud. Whether you pay out of your pocket, if you have federal loans, if you have private loans, you've still been done wrong. And it's kind of like theft. I mean, the story that Ashley just told, that's theft. I don't care how you look at it. They're making you pay for something you already have. That's just wrong all the way around.
this makes me so angry but I think it helps illustrate that it's not just the for-profit schools that are scamming students. The Department of Education is scamming people. That what they're doing when they put that incentive to re-enroll is really, really dirty and trying to cheat people out of the cancellation that they are rightfully entitled to by the law for a number of reasons. One is that most of these credits at for-profit schools will not transfer to legitimate schools. So they are forcing people into another predatory for-profit school when they do that. And we've seen similar tricks, really dirty tricks around closed school discharges. So, borrow defense and closed school discharge are 2 separate mechanisms. But when Corinthian College collapsed, the Department of Education did everything they could to keep those campuses open, even going so far as to sell it to a predatory debt collector, ECMC, and rebrand it as Zenith, And the entire purpose of doing that, Zenith is now closed, but the entire purpose of doing that was to get as many students as they could to accept a teach out, to get a worthless degree. And as soon as they get that teach out, they don't qualify for borrowed defense anymore. Or they don't qualify for closed school discharge anymore. Betsy DeVos tried the same trick. So that was under Obama. Obama did that under with Corinthian. Betsy DeVos tried the same trick with Art Institute campuses. And right now, Independence University has been closed, and those students could get a closed school discharge, and it's not being made clear to them that they could do that. And instead, they are transferring to other predatory for-profit schools that are doing the same thing and accepting a teach out and getting screwed. So I think you should draw a really, really hard and bright line and say, if you re-enroll at another school, it does not change, you do not forfeit your borrowed defense rights.
I agree. You know, I personally, I think a huge part of the problem itself is the Department of Education. You know, if they followed the borrower's defense regulation to the letter of the law, none of us would be sitting here because it would have been taken care of in a timely fashion. But at the same time, you know, the Department of Education has blown it with their regulation of these types of schools. And now they're faced with the possibility that they may have to forgive hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in student loans, because this did not happen in a vacuum. You know,
I told them that at the negotiation tables. I told them they were the gatekeeper. So bottom line, they are responsible.
yeah, they blew it.
Yep, they did.
And it's students that are paying the price.
Right. And they bailed those colleges out, and they bailed Corinthian out a number of times, over and over again, to keep them going. Why keep something going that's just stealing from students? They're not providing the education, they're just taking the money, all of it that they can get their hands on.
ACICS accreditation is just proof of that. I mean, this was supposed to be a government oversight and accreditation
Right. I think
of
they
our
were
these
over
schools,
Corinthian as well.
and yet they're getting kickbacks and they're looking the other way. And, you know, the board of directors has their hands in for-profit companies or their stakeholders, you know? So.
Dirty money.
Yep.
Something that I've been asking, like literally anybody who has experienced or has any information on this, because I'm really struggling to wrap my head around it, is like, yeah, they have these like regulations and things, but not all of them seem to line up, and there's a lot of gaps, right? Is there any kind of like flow chart of how this is supposed to work, not just from a student perspective, but I can't figure out what the workflow with the Department of Ed is, which I think is really important, because like, and not like, I don't know what I'm saying by this, but like, okay, so somebody submits their claim, right? And then that would go to someone's office, right? Like in other spaces that I've worked in, you know, it goes to me and then it goes over here to this person who does this part of it, right? Like, but from the only thing that I've gotten is somebody told me that it's really just a tiny office, like a few people trying to process all of these, and that there's no workflow, like nothing like that. And they're just supposed to look over the whole application by themselves and approve or deny, individually, over and over, for hundreds of thousands of people. Is that really how this is happening?
So in, I'm sure Teresa can't really speak this much, but if you actually read through some of the testimony from, I think it was in April, from the Department of Education being depositioned, I read almost all 600 pages of it. They talk a lot about the process, and that's exactly how you're saying it is. They tried to bring on lawyers. They were given what I don't even remember right now. I think it was 3 to 5 minutes per application to look it over. And they were basically looking at, you know, which school did they attend? And, you know, Betsy DeVos and a few other people on the Department of Education had ties to CEC. And so anybody in CEC was basically just thrown into a denial
I don't know if, I don't remember the guy's name, it was John Smith or something. They brought in when we first started, when Corinthian first folded. They brought someone in to oversee the process because they had no process for borrower defense because the law was hidden back in the Education Act of 1965.
Yeah.
Well, when we brought it out and exposed it, they had no process, no way to process it. So I don't think they had the people to do the job efficiently. They didn't even know what they were doing. They had not a clue. So I don't know where it's at now, but I know back then they didn't even have a way to do it and they had to bring someone in to oversee it. And Thomas, do you remember the man's name?
So yeah, I think you're talking about the special master who,
Right.
Yeah.
and that was sort of a different process, but the borrower defense unit is understaffed, highly dysfunctional, is doing things manually by spreadsheet. And even the Department of Education, like they have siloed off the borrower defense unit. So I have spoken to high-ranking members of federal student aid who say even they are asking questions of the borrower defense unit and getting stonewalled and not getting answers and don't have access to the data. It's all separate. And so it's like, you know, obviously we are outsiders and have limited views into the system, but based on what we can see, like imagine the most poorly run Keystone Cops operation you can imagine, and then multiply it by 1,000. And that seems to be how they're running the borrower defense unit.
Then
Still
they
the
opened a
same.
call center, right? So they had a few people together looking at things, and then rather than putting in folks for their understaffed office, they were like, here's a call center.
The call
Yes.
center, to me, quite frankly, with the kind of information they're able to give out at the call center, they might as well have not made a call center. You can get 3 different people, they'll tell you 3 different things. No one knows what they're talking about. I mean, one of the biggest class actions I've ever heard of is the one that has my name on it. And people will tell me that they call and say, hey, my loans are going back into repayment, but they're supposed to be in administrative forbearance because I'm a member of this lawsuit. And the people at the borrower's defense hotline don't even know what the lawsuit is about. I mean, they're
Yeah.
clueless. They, no.
I remember
Yeah, there's a hotline. Woo.
Thomas and I called, he called on my behalf one time and, oh, that was a circus call. They were just, I couldn't keep up with them. I couldn't make sense of it. So he called for me and they just didn't know what they were doing. They were at a loss.
So the call center is completely separate from the Department of Education and completely separate from the borrower defense unit. So the borrower defense unit is this tiny group of people, understaffed, underpaid, overwhelmed with thousands of spreadsheets that they are manually updating. The call center is called Censure. It is a private company located in Kentucky, and they have no access to the borrower defense unit, none whatsoever. It's just a completely separate system. And when you call the call center, there's very limited information they can give you. They can tell you whether or not they've received your borrower defense claim. They can answer some very basic questions about like the process for applying, basically the same information you can find online. And then beyond that, they'll just, like, if they don't know the answer, they'll say, you should talk to your servicer, and the servicers can't help either. So it's, in my personal opinion, the purpose of the call center is to just run interference. It's to give people somebody to reach out to when they're frustrated, but not actually like solve any problems or share any information. I would love to get the contract for Censure. I've never seen it, but as far as I'm concerned, they could close that down and you wouldn't lose anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's just to make people think that they're doing something and there's a way that they can contact them. It's a smokescreen, so to speak.
That's another reason why I think the idea of instating group or blanket forgiveness for people is important, because the borrower's defense unit is so small. There's no way that they can reasonably complete a thorough, honest, actual review of any one individual's application when there are so many people waiting for it to be processed. I mean, there's just no way. We'd be waiting more and more years if it was done as is right now.
And how
Well,
can so
my
many
personal,
students- Go ahead, Pam.
I don't know, I was just gonna say, my personal opinion, when the application comes and you get the name of a school that has been established that the school is either closed or, was negligent, fraudulent, whatever. Once you get that, like, what else is there to do? And then you just check to see if this person really attended, and if so, yeah, rubber stamp it, approved. I mean, because what are you going to really investigate? You already know that the school shut down or did this or did that. Now you got a name. They told you the school. Boom. Just, I mean, that it's as simple as that, but obviously they're not gonna, let it be that simple. But I don't see what all this other stuff is. That's my whole issue.
Especially when they have already found the school guilty.
Right.
And all these students that attended when they found that school guilty, they know it didn't just start that day. They've been watching them for a while.
Right.
How can they make the students go through individual process when they already know the school has committed fraud? Everyone knows it. It's all over the news.
Exactly,
And they're the
Ann.
ones that exposed it.
Exactly.
Why should the students have to prove it when they've already proved it? Which I've made that statement also at the table.
Right.
Right.
And I have been contacted by people who have said, they went to one of the big name schools that already had forgiveness and who had applied, but he didn't attend during the right years. So he still has his full loan balance due.
However, his diploma still has that school's name on it. Everyone knows that school was not a legit school.
Exactly.
So his diploma is worthless no matter, I don't care when you attend.
Exactly. Yep.
That school
Yep.
is not legitimate, not recognized by any employer.
Yes.
I have another question. Sorry, like I said, I had a list that Dixie and I were like, here are the things that we don't know, and they're like weird and specific, maybe. But maybe I asked this, but like, how many different means of communication that a department engage with, right? So it sounds like you all submit an application either by paper or by online, so you can go check that. But then, like, I've heard other folks being like, yeah, so I got an email that said this, but then when I called, they had no idea. And then they'd get a letter. And then I was like, wait, so they're calling, emailing, and sending letters, and none of them are saying, they're not all like saying the same thing?
That's typical. That's very typical of stories that I hear. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing over there. Well, maybe they do, and it's intentional, but at any rate, it doesn't serve students.
Yeah, all of my communication was email. I've never gotten a phone call from them. Anytime I've ever seen anything from the Department of Ed, it's always been through my email. I mean, even the letter that I got stating, okay, your loans have been approved to be forgiven. And, they got the whole Department of Education seal and all that. That was even email. That didn't even come in the mail as an official, seal stamped correspondence. Everything for me was email.
How did you all find out you could make a claim? This is a question we've heard. I know you all said the Facebook group, and I've talked to some other students, and all of them said that they found out off of Facebook.
Yeah, me personally, I happened to be going through Yahoo one day just at home, just, surfing the web. And there was this little questionnaire in a box, and it kind of caught my eye as I was getting ready to leave that page. And I saw the word Corinthian. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think Everest is part of Corinthian. Let me read it. So I read it, and it said, did you go to any of Corinthian college, Corinthian, colleges, blah, 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 this and that. And I'm checking off the answers. And then when I got to the bottom, it said, you may be eligible for debt forgiveness or something. And I'm like, what? So I clicked it, and within probably 30 minutes, someone from the Debt Collective from California, her name was Hannah Appel, she called me and she started telling me, you know, what was going on. That's how I first found out. I had no clue. At this time, I don't think it was really on TV yet. It wasn't really in the newspapers. I really believe once the Debt Collective got involved from the Everest Avengers, the first 15 that told their stories. I think once that happened and then the Debt Collective got involved, that's when it became like, you know, a big nationwide household thing where you could see it on TV. But that's how I first found out. And that was like probably the late part of 2014 going into 2015. And that's how I got, you know, told information about what was going on.
Yes, I found out on Facebook in the group Everest Vendors. Well, I think we called it Corinthian Collective back then. But it's right after Corinthian crumbled. And I mean, I was distraught. Laura Hannah contacted me on there, and thank God she kept on me. I kept saying, I can't, you know, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to help me. What am I going to do? Oh my God, you know? And that's when we all went to California. They had been to, I think, Anaheim, and at a education department meeting there. And they wanted me to go then, and I didn't go. I backed out. I didn't know who the group was. Well, Laura kept on me, and then they were going to San Francisco, and she had me go out there, and that's when we declared our debt strike. 15 became official, and that's
right.
how I found out.
Right, and that's how. And then I found out after the process you went through is before me, because once you did all of that, then that's when they started contacting other people, and then I became the Corinthian 100, and you know, that's when I found out.
Yes, we grew quickly.
Yeah.
I originally heard about borrower's defense when the collapse of Corinthian was on TV all the time. And it just, all these bells went off because I was like, hey, that sounds exactly like my school. And then somebody invited me to the Facebook group that Ashley is in. And that's where the majority of the organizing for, at least for our school, has happened.
Yeah, I think each school had their own little groups. I mean, I'm in like 3 of them, I think. ITT, AI, and the Everest, the Corinthian ones. But I think each school had their own group as they joined.
I'd be curious if we added this question to the borrower defense form, what some empirical data would show. But my guess is that it would be word of mouth. It would be social media. It would be other people reaching out. The Department of Education is not telling people about their rights. So I think a couple of things could be said about that. One is that for schools like Corinthian, ITT Tech, Art Institute, DeVry, we shouldn't be asking people to do individual applications. We should be doing it on a group-wide basis. But borrower defense, if it was actually enforced, could be a diagnostic tool to flush out fraud when it happens. FSA could be notifying people on a quarterly basis. If your school has misled you, defrauded you, here are your rights. Here's where you can start a claim. And this would benefit everybody because we would have these early warning signals of which schools are up to things they shouldn't be up to, and stamp it out early before we get to the point where there's tens of thousands of students and hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of debt at stake. We can, this is fraud detection.
Exactly. I told them at NEGREG also that when I applied to go to Corinthian, they knew that the school was not level. It's not on the level at all. They knew that. Why did you not notify me that the school I chose was in trouble? Therefore, you're to blame too, just as much as the
Exactly.
school.
Never thought of it that way, but that's a really, really good point.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
them.
complicit.
I told their lawyer.
They're complicit. Yeah.
I do have to hop off pretty quick on that. Like something that we really thought was just astonishing was like, okay, so like your school closes down, or you're finding this like large scale fraud, right, for borrower's defense. We were like, neither the school nor the Department of Ed or anybody has to notify these students who are going there, like, hey, this is a thing, it's an option, like a letter or an email. These schools obviously have all of these students' information, and just like that notice of what's happening, I think is really interesting. I don't know if that's the right word.
We leave it up to students who did not go to law school to try to figure out how to navigate this antiquated gargantuan system when the Department of Education is supposed to be protecting students, and they've completely blown it on this.
Students have had no rights. There was never anyone representing students at the negotiating table prior to me being there. I was the first student ever to be at that table. That's wrong, number one.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They're making rules
Yep.
for students, and students have no say in the matter. They're not even notified of these rules that are on them. There's no student rights whatsoever in education.
So Michaela, can I ask you, so are you, or are you not, are you from a for-profit school or no?
I graduated with my bachelor's. So I went to community college at a public, and then a 4-year public, and then now I'm at a private not-for-profit.
Oh, okay. So then basically, so you're at the neg reg
no.
table now as a student, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you've never been to a for-profit school. So they don't have any students at the neg reg table that have been to a for-profit
No,
school?
and that's something that like Dixie and I really fought for, and that's part of what brought us to try and engage in these conversations, because as students, like, you know, like I want to be like the best student voice that I can, you know, but that also isn't my voice and my story.
Right,
And I work in other advocacy spaces. My primary advocacy tends to be for student parents. I had a bill passed in Oregon, and do
Right,
other things around like childcare. So like, you know, but that's my story, right? Like, but my
Right.
story isn't the for-profit story. I mean, I was crying in Neg Reg one day. I don't know if you all saw it, how much you do from watching that, but like, as a single mom in school, I was like, I can't imagine working this hard, like for my degree, doing all of these things, and then finding out it was for nothing. Like it crushes me. Like I know that my feelings don't help you all at all, but like, I just want you to know that that's, you know, there isn't a voice there, and the best that Dixie and she's really sad she couldn't make it this morning. She got called in.
Right. Right.
Was for us to just listen and to hear, so that we can carry those to the table and be like, hey, this is what we're hearing from students. Like, so that even though we don't have that voice at the table, that maybe we could help.
Right. And then,
You know,
and this is another thing. I know you said you have to hop off, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just another smokescreen, because if you're not listening to the people that this impacted, and this is nothing against you or Dixie, if you're not listening to the people or hearing the stories directly from the people that this for-profit system and how to do the borrowed defense impacts, what is the purpose? Like what? Because like you said, you can't tell our story because it's not your story. And even if you relay it, whether it be on paper or you verbalize it, that same passion, that same anger or frustration, they're not going to hear that because it's not your story.
That's why we brought that group in when at NEGREG, when I was at the table, we brought that group in from Debt Collective to speak, to show them there's actual people behind these stories. And we put it like in their face. They had no choice but to associate faces with these situations.
See, my personal feeling is that to a large extent, I feel like the Department of Education already knows all of this. They know how many lives have been ruined. They know how many people have 6-figure student loan debts from scams.
Absolutely.
They just don't seem to give a damn. And if they do, their actions are not showing it. And I understand you have to go, so I'll try to be as brief.
I have a few minutes. You're okay.
I believe that you want to do the right thing by students. That's not even a concern of mine.
Right.
What I'm worried about is the people on that committee who are associated with the for-profit ed industry. One of them in particular was a key person in stripping away and making all the things that we've been talking about in the past few years. She's one of the main people that made it happen. So I'm really concerned that there's one vote on that committee that could, I don't know, kamikaze the whole thing.
That happened when I was there. The for-profit representative, which was the lawyer for Corinthian,
Mhm.
he was the enemy. I mean, and I just couldn't even stand to look at that man. He was sitting two seats away from me, and it was like I could
If
just
you-
feel the negative energy just vibrating off of him. It was awful.
If you've never seen it, there's a documentary called Fail State. Have you?
I saw that. That's good.
Michaela, I would highly recommend that you watch it. I think it's available online for free because it talks about the pervasive influence of for-profit education in this country. I've lobbied before in Sacramento. I know one of the things that you are going to talk about is the gainful employment rule. So Obama put it in place, DeVos's NEGREG committee stripped it away, and I was trying to help them get a state of California gainful employment rule so to protect students. And every single time we showed up to lobby, it was like myself and a couple other former students, along with some nonprofit attorneys, so this little ragtag band going in there and shaking our fists. I'm not kidding you when I say that every single time that there was a committee that was going to vote on that legislation, the for-profit industry literally.
Did we lose
Oh,
Trish?
no, the good part.
Right. Why?
Oh, we
Hold
lost
up.
you for a second, Teresa. Can you
Yeah, you
repeat what you
froze
said
up.
about like 30 seconds ago?
So whenever we would show up to lobby, it was our little ragtag band of activists against literal busloads. Like they chartered tour buses for the for-profit attorneys to come in and talk about why the for-profit schools shouldn't have to be held up to the same standards as state and nonprofit schools. So their influence is completely outsized. I've never witnessed corruption up close like that before. It's appalling.
Not just attorneys, they had current
Oh yeah, they had
for-profit students as well too.
little freshmen who had no idea what they were getting into. They had them come up and talk about what a great experience it is in my school. And, I talked to some of them in the hallway to be like, listen, for your medical assisting class that you're trying to take, you can take that in a semester or two at a community college for less than $5,000, but you're paying $35,000 for it. Like, why? And they didn't understand it yet. So, I mean, it's the for-profit industry, their influence is completely out of control. And it really worries me that we're not going to be able to get back to the somewhat fair rules of the prior administration. I'm sorry, the Obama administration.
There's too
the
many
DeVos-
people with money backing it up.
Yeah, the DeVos Department of Education completely undermined Barrow's defense. I can honestly say that if this continues to go on and we are not able to reasonably get our loans forgiven, I'm going to have to leave the United States because my debt is so big that I can't get away from it any other way.
Yeah. So why does anyone on the panel, why won't the Department of Education just kind of like say no to for-profit colleges? Like, yeah, you can apply to them, but you have to pay for them out of pocket. We're no longer going to facilitate you going to for-profit schools, especially when they know for-profit is not really about education. It's for them making money.
Honestly, they're involved in it too. They're making money off of it too.
Yeah, Betsy DeVos owned stock in student debt collection companies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
She had one of the worst actors from the company that owned our school was in her inner circle in the Department of Education.
Yeah.
It's just the whole system is corrupt.
So one thing that I uncovered about our school, and this is all in my report that I think I sent everybody in that chain. I don't know if anybody else needs it, I can resend it too. Senator Dianne Feinstein was a major investor in our school. So that just tells you that it's a gravy train. If these schools can turn over shareholder profit off of federally backed money where there is no recourse for default or bankruptcy, they're vested in keeping that gravy train open.
Right.
You know, I'm just sitting here with like tears in my eyes, literally ready to just break down and cry, knowing that people are suffering, even with my situation, living in a hotel for 4 months with a severely disabled son, blind, deaf, wheelchair bound, total care, just trying to survive. And these people are making money off of my suffering, your suffering, and other people's suffering. It is just so, it's just not right. It's just not right. I mean, and the reason that I went to school was, you know, to make a better life so that I could make a decent wage, you know, a livable wage to take care of my kids. So I wouldn't have to be a system problem with, you know, the welfare and the this and the that, because if you do that, they talk about you. So we go back to school, we try to get an education to be better and to be, you know, be able to contribute to society, and we get scammed. And because we say something, they talk about you. So I don't know, it's just terrible.
You're taught your whole life that education's your surest route to success.
Yeah.
It was a straight route to failure.
That's a big lie.
Exactly.
It's a big
just-
lie.
yeah.
This is the straight path to devastation. At least that's what
Yes.
I've seen. And you know, and then to think, yeah, to think that's the legacy that I passed on to my girls, because I have 3 girls that have went to college, they've graduated, and they're starting out their life. And I mean, you know, they're young and they're late 20s, early 20s. They're starting out their life with $60,000+ in student debt. They didn't go to a for-profit, but I'm just saying in general, because I said, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you do it. You got to go to school. You got to get an education. You got to this, you got to that. And none of them can find jobs in their degree field of study. So they've taken jobs that are not in their field of study, where they're getting not the money that I guess they could make if they were working in their field of study, where they can't even afford to pay their debt back. Like, it's just the whole thing is a scam. I just, the whole damn thing.
It takes their entire life away from them. They have no chance of having a life because they have so much debt when they start out.
Exactly.
It's taking your life away from you instead of giving you a good life.
Exactly. It's the opposite of what they say. Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm all of that. It's just terrible.
The thing that really frustrates me the most right now is the fact that career education is, well, they've rebranded to Perdicio, but they're still a publicly traded company and their stocks are actually not doing horrible.
Wow.
So they're still
There's a lot of people that
Still
do not
doing that.
realize this is going on in education, believe it or not.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
they think,
that is
oh,
true. There's a lot of
they
people
think
that
the
don't know.
same. Yeah, they still think the same thing that the Department of Education wants them to think, that we're just looking for a free ride, you know.
Yeah.
There's so many of those comments out there, and I've seen so many of them over the years, and it just makes me even angrier. It's like, you don't understand. You don't have a clue what they're doing through education, in the name of education. Education is not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
So I hate to jump in because this is also powerful, but I also know that we've kept Michaela a little bit longer than we.
Ooh, I'm so sorry. I have to go get dental work. I can't express how grateful I am for all of you to share your stories and how impactful and also helpful, you know, that information is moving forward. And I think that all of you have my contact info too. So please, like, stay in touch. And
You do the same, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yes, absolutely. Reach
Yeah.
out anytime if they start throwing stuff at you that you guys need sort of a perspective on. I'm happy to give it.
Same here.
Thank
I
you all
don't
so
think
much.
we-
Thank you for an invite at this little table of wealth
Oh,
of
thank
information.
you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pamela, for coming so much.
And if you want
Okay.
to submit some questions to us in writing, I don't think we got through all of your questions. We'd be happy to answer them in another format.
Cool. Yeah, I can send this over to you.
Great.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, it was good
Have a
seeing
good-
everybody. Good
Good to
seeing you,
meet you
Ann.
all.
You too,
You too,
Thomas.
Pam. You take care.
Take care.
Okay, I will.
See you, Thomas. See you.